Welcome to 2021. Seoul Dynasty preview, team
Welcome
preview.
To the entire year of 2021.
Welcome to this is a
3 months too late.
We're deep in 20. We're actually quarter of the way through.
No, a sixth of the way through, because we're at the beginning of the third month. We've completed 2 out of 12 months.
We're not at the first quarter yet.
The first what?
No, that's
quarter?
after third month.
Well, we're in the
like
first
a couple of
quarter,
days,
I guess.
Okay, doesn't matter. Anyway, we've got Jaws is joining us here. His name's Jack.
Hi.
He's a
Professional
streamer.
Raft player.
He plays Raft.
Yeah, professional
when I
Raft
don't.
player.
Yeah, and he's joined
One
us
of
here
two.
for this Seoul Dynasty. Basically, because Matt's got a job now that he's too busy. He's like, he's too
He's too cool for us.
Just grab anybody. And so we were like, okay, we'll grab Jack.
You got like 2 hours, Jaws, to like prepare for this episode. How ready do you feel to do team previews right now?
It's really interesting because every time I get dragged in to do Plat chat, it's either within the 2 hour time frame or 2 minute time frame. So, preparation a little bit varied. I was actually planning on streaming right now and actually eating food, but
No, you
not
don't
doing
need to
that.
do that.
Actually helping my
Don't need
friends.
We can do the team preview instead.
You and
Yeah,
Kurt
yeah.
can split the ad revenue.
That'll
Yeah.
provide
that
you
would be hot.
nourishment.
I also got a hat in. Remember that hat that
Oh,
Avast was
yeah.
talking about? The himbo
Wow.
Oh, the
hat.
himbo hat.
So Avast ordered this, and I thought, well, I don't have my own personality, so I'm just going to copy his. And I ordered my own hat.
It's worked
that's
out for
pretty
you this
good.
far.
I like the way that your bleach blonde hair sticks out from underneath your himbo hat.
Mhm.
It's very thematically fitting.
There you go. My own little himbo hat. And now we can get started with this episode. Seoul Dynasty. It's a team. They've made a couple of changes, haven't they? When I say a couple of changes, I was looking at this roster, and there's one player on here who has been part of this team for a long time. Not the longest of times, but pretty long.
Yeah.
It's Fitz. Fitz has been on this team since the end of 2018.
Oh,
Yeah, he's been on it for quite a while.
That's kind of crazy.
And Marvel.
I think Marvel joined at the
Oh,
beginning of
yeah,
2019, didn't
No,
he?
sorry, you're right. Yeah, Marvel was on this team.
Season 2,
You
yeah.
are right, yeah. Marvel was
Yep.
on this team in October.
Right.
Wasn't Fisher on this team as well then? Oh, it was good times.
But I mean,
I don't remember.
October 2018 compared to December 2018 is pretty much exactly
Pretty
the
much
same.
the
It's
same.
just
Yeah, no,
the off season. Right?
I missed
Yeah.
that. I was looking at the wrong
Yeah.
Wikipedia thing. But no, super interesting anyway. But I mean, I don't really know where we want to begin with this.
Well, you raise a good point, because if you look at the former players on this team, they have made quite an important change, because I believe I'm right in now saying that there's no original Lunatic High players left involved in the Seoul Dynasty whatsoever. This core of the team that was picked up at the very beginning now have none of them. I mean, Toby was the last one standing.
He was the last one.
He was the last one standing after Miro disappeared, Zunba disappeared, then Ryuje Hong recently
Bubbly.
disappeared as well.
Bubbly.
But I feel like at this point, Seoul Dynasty is like their own thing.
Oh, I think Bubbly might have been a coach for them at some point.
Right.
Yeah,
You'd hope they'd be their own thing after, what feels like about 24 years after Apex ended. So
I mean, Lunatic High, you cannot underestimate like how big Lunatic High was in Overwatch Esports. Like it was like
It's still one of the
Korean
biggest teams
team
in
for the
Overwatch.
longest time.
looking at its history for sure.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it coincides with the NYXL, who I'm repping Jonak right now as well. But he's the last one standing of that team, and he wasn't even involved in the old core that they brought in. So, like, the Season 3 is really fresh beginnings all over the place.
It really is, yeah. When I look at the Seoul Dynasty as a team this year, the one thing that I want them to aim for is not a particular place, but it's consistency. Because I cannot think of a more inconsistent team than Seoul Dynasty of last year.
Yeah.
They were all over the place in the regular season in terms of their playoff performances as well.
God, just going through their season last year is mind-melting to try and make sense of.
Yeah.
They started in the NA region before we had like them split, and they pounded both of the Los Angeles teams. Then they pounded the Spark, and then they just went on a loss streak. And then they came back and they pounded
Lost
the
to
Dragons
Chengdu.
again. Yeah, and then they lost to Chengdu. This team was wild at the beginning of the year. I feel like they evened out a bit towards the end, but not a huge amount.
I mean, none of us had expectations for what they were going to do for the championship run. You know,
Yeah.
at the end of the year, I feel like our expectations weren't that high for them, but they.
I put them in my top 4. I think I even put them in the finals in my bracket. You know, because they're Seoul Dynasty. I was the one who was like, it's Seoul Dynasty. It's playoff P, playoff profit.
And it does. That really does happen. If they get into those kind of situations, like they nearly won the May Melee as well. That first tournament that was involved in APAC, they had to be reverse swept by Shanghai. That remains one of the greatest matches that I've watched.
Yeah, but that was actually legit though, because I still think that even though that the Seoul Dynasty got second in last year's grand final, I think a lot of people will make the argument. It's like, oh, well, it's because Gesture played the Roadhog and it was like a wonky meta. And it's like, it's actually the same thing that happened in 2018 as well, where you had like the flex support playing like weird Tracer and Roadhog roles and stuff like that. And it's like, you could definitely make the argument now that like when Gesture and Prophet has won the championship twice, well, they do it when it's like a weird meta. You know, and they overcome these teams that struggle to adapt. So one could make that argument. But in the May Melee, they actually showed that they got second place, playing a pretty solid composition, right? And so I still think that people shouldn't overlook Seoul Dynasty just because they have success in these weird metas. I think overall, it's still a good organization and a good lineup. And I still have trust in these players. We should probably go over role by role the players and talk about them.
Let's talk about the DPS.
I have faith.
Let's talk about the DPS line, because the DPS
Prophet.
line...
Good.
Yep. You got Playoff Prophet, of course. You got Fitz as well, who's one of the most long-standing members that we already talked about. And Sabi Olvin, who's another addition recently.
What a weird addition, though.
It is a strange addition, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the role that I feel like Sabi Olby would encompass almost gets taken over by both Fitz and Prophet in terms of their hero pools. And so
a little bit.
Say again?
A little bit, but not entirely. I think, you know, he can still craft his own kind of role within that team. And especially if he brings out the Tracer, we've seen, you know, Prophet is super capable of playing like flex DPS and stuff. So it's more so like, and now we have, I mean, I was going to say that you have Fitz and Sabi Olby playing double hit scan too, but it's like, do you want to bench Prophet? No, you don't, because he can play any of those heroes. It's like, I don't know, I love it. It's Sabi Olby too. You know, I'm a stan.
I think
so it is.
I think you've been sold by nostalgia, Jonathan.
I've always been low-key a Seoul fan. Not because like I like cheering for the organization, but because I just love their results, their team. I mean, I guess I'm a fan of that team at that point. But I'm just like, when you say that you want consistency out of Seoul Dynasty, I'm like, no, I don't want consistency out of Seoul Dynasty, because they're just so fun to follow. Because it's like, oh, the next week it's like wins, and the next one it's like they just get rolled, and you're like, what is happening? Gesture's playing a Roadhog, and then he's like playing Rhine and just inting, and it's like, I love it. It's so entertaining. Like Seoul Dynasty, they're not like entertainment thieves that you branded the Washington Justice when they like went to that loss streak. It's like Seoul, they don't even have to be that good, but they just provide entertainment because it's so fun to follow this team, because you never know what you're gonna expect, and they're really good and sometimes really bad when they shouldn't be really bad, and I love it.
That's not what you want as a fan, though.
I mean, he is a fan. That is what he wants.
Well, I don't know if I am a fan then, because I just like
you just like entertainment, Johnny. You're a fan of entertainment and the coin flip of the team. I think
Prince in the Skyrim universe who just like loves chaos. You know what I'm talking about? Like, I feel like that's what Johnny is.
But why'd you go towards Skyrim instead of just like Loki?
The Elder Scrolls.
Right, but why didn't you go towards like Nordic mythology or anything like that? You're like, the god of chaos from Skyrim.
from Tamriel.
Yeah, from Tamriel.
I've been thinking a lot about Skyrim recently, but that's a tale for another time. We don't have to talk about that at the moment.
Well, yeah. Jaws, you said that you also thought the Sabi Olby pick was weird.
Yeah, so Prophet, I feel like, covers all of those roles. Also, SBB I feel like he just didn't play last year. I just looked at his over.gg page and like how many games he did actually play, because in my mind, I'm looking at MYXL and I can never remember. Maybe I just didn't cast those games, but like I felt like I never remember actually calling his name out at any one point. Like maybe he played 2 games, but
he didn't.
Looking
play
at
much.
it, he played a fair bit in the early weeks. These were homestands: week 1, week 3, week 3, week 5, and then it was like week 12, and then 2 week 12s and a week 13, and then 15. Then it was done.
God, I mean,
And then he
look
played
at
in the-
Prophet's
Yeah,
Tracer.
I know.
There is
And
no world in which you feed Saebiobi over
exactly.
Prophet
And
Tracer.
do you put SBB in a position where it's like, wow, we're bringing him on for like the fans that are going to now follow SBB to the team?
You put him
but then
in so Prophet can be better than Fitz in other roles.
Sure,
Yeah.
and that was my next point. Do you then move Prophet to something else and you put SBB on just a one-trick Tracer and then just only have him on Tracer maps? Because at the moment, Tracer is pretty insane. And if you look at the meta and how variable it is currently, even if you look at like the Steel Series tournament that happened recently, I think you do need a fairly deep DPS hero pool. So SBB, if you look at just the meta on its own, I think it's actually a fairly decent pickup if you want Prophet to just not focus on the Tracer pick.
Yeah, that's the only world in which Saebiobi gets fielded, though, is if you have something like an Echo Tracer meta, right? And you want Prophet on the Echo, and then you're like, okay, let's have Saebiobi on the Tracer. My problem with that is, in APAC, normally they just do like Echo Sombra anyway, and Fitz would end up playing. Because people are going to bring up, oh, well, Saebiobi played Sombra. Fitz has been playing the Sombra for this team, and he's been looking better and better and better at it the more he plays. Mm-hmm. So I don't see that as being a role for him either. Like, for me, it's only Tracer, and only when Prophet has to play something else where Saebiobi gets fielded.
Yeah. All right.
Is there another niche that you can think of, Jonathan?
No, I mean, I'd almost make the case that Fitz might even have the better Ashe, and might even have the better Widowmaker. You know? And Saebiobi can play McCree, but it's like, do you want Fitz in there to play the McCree or Saebiobi? I think obviously Saebiobi has more name value and is the bigger star of the two, but you cannot look over Fitz and what he did last year as well. So I think there are two very capable players, but for the most part, I would probably only put in Saebiobi for the Tracer.
What do you think about the argument that Saebiobi is going to be useful for them as like a stabilizing figure? Because people have talked a lot about, Saebiobi is, I don't want to just say people have talked about it, it is a fact that he is a great team leader. He has that personality where he's just very good at being able to help other people on his team stay calm, maintain focus, be like a good teammate. We've seen that happen over in the course of the league whenever Saebiobi's been in multiple times. Do you think he can do that and like stop Seoul from oscillating so much from a week-to-week basis, even if he isn't fielded? Like from the bench, can he still do that role? I've heard people theorizing that is going to be where he gets his most impact.
I think that's a bit overrated. Look at it like that.
Yeah.
Like there's no doubt in my mind that we know that he's a good veteran presence in the team, but this feels like to me like a PR move almost, where Saebiobi gets let go by NYXL, he's a free agent, and like Seoul's like, well, okay, I mean we can pick up literally one of the most popular players, one of the most popular Korean players, and we gain a bunch of goodwill, and off the back of that, I don't know. I mean, we've already pointed out, I don't really see him getting played over Fitz or Prophet in this team. I just don't think, even his Tracer, which is his most dominant role that you're seeing here, I just can't see him replacing Prophet in a meta like that. And especially with the kind of the Overwatch League that we live in now, with hero pools being a thing, is you need a deep hero pool on your DPS players, because that's the one thing that's always going to be fluctuating. And what we saw last year is that the teams that didn't have that, if they had DPS players that were kind of just almost one-trick ponies in terms of what they could play, they struggled a lot in terms of the hero pools. They struggled a lot with that consistency. And yeah, it's not going to be for the entirety of the season. It's only going to be part for it. But I don't really see a place for him in this team as it stands. And I think, I don't know, maybe there's a concept of like a team leader coming into the team, but he's probably not going to be on the active roster. So doesn't that diminish it a little bit?
I don't think you can be an effective team leader if you don't play, really.
Yeah.
Like I just think that the majority of that happens inside the server. And I think unless you're going to be in more of a coaching role, which I don't really think he is going
There's
to be.
only so much you can do by standing behind them when they're in the game, Like, you actually have to be in there to be effective as that
I guess, like,
leader that everybody's painting him to be.
You can mediate what happens from a week-to-week basis in terms of, like, I don't know, if part of their reason for inconsistency was that they had wildly different ideas on the meta from one week to the next, and he's in the scrims and he's saying, all right guys, just calm it down, like we know that we're better at this kind of stuff, let's focus on that for next week. I don't know, like all of that kind of stuff is just coaching, really. It's not mental.
I think I disagree here. So I think you have to make the separation first, that when you say that he's going to be this like calming and kind of like stabilizing figure, I think you have to define how you define that in the first place, which is like, I don't think he's going to be this teammate that is like, I don't think he has to be that guy who's holding Flower's hand, you know, when Flower got on stage and it was like a really tense match and like he needed to calm down Flower because, you know, so much pressure on him to perform. I don't think he emotionally has to be that comforting figure to like calm it down that way. I could see a role where he's just a fun teammate to play with. And maybe you could speak to this, Joss, as well, where it's like, if you sometimes get into a game where it's like, you know, you're having trouble figuring out the meta and you're not doing too well and you can't figure out why you're not doing too well, just having like a nice teammate that's fun to play with and still like brings that PMA energy, which I do think that Sabiolbi does. Even if it's not like picture perfect gameplay, having someone that's fun to play with gives a bit of a mental reset in the first place. Even in
also
practice.
It feels like you don't feel as bad when you lose, right?
Yeah, I think if they struggle with fits,
I'm talking about you.
You know, teams are inevitably going to struggle with fits, or not with fits per se, but it's like teams are going the season because it's like it's a new meta. Hey, we're trying this comp is not really working. And I think that Sabiolbi can just be this guy who comes in sometimes, gives solid performances, not like world beater performances, but like really good performances, and it's just fun to play with and gives a bit of a like mental reset in practice when you need it. So I still think he can contribute in that way because he's not like he's washed up, you know, like he's still really good. We're saying that Fit is better, but I think he's really good and can bring some of this like PMA energy, and I think that can actually help, you know, especially in practice. Like I would love to play with Sabiolbi. I would look forward to practicing with that guy. And maybe it's because, you know, I haven't been his teammate, and maybe because I'm a bit of a fan, you know, but like I would look forward to like if he came in and I'll be like, hell yeah, I'm playing with Sabiolbi. He's fun to play with. And I think that does make a difference in mindset when you're practicing like 8-10 hours a day.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a more cynical view where it is just, I think
just can't believe you're criticizing Sabiolbi.
I'm
like
not criticizing. I think
Sabiolbi
is a very good player, but I think it's a shame that he's on a team with Fitz and Profit because I just can't see him getting playtime alongside these guys. I'm not saying that he's washed and he's only being picked up to, I don't know, make vlog content for Seoul. That's not what I'm saying.
That would be sick.
But
sorry. I feel like I'm gaslighting you now, Bren. I'm sorry.
Because he's a good player, but I just think that who he's going to be competing with in this team have proven themselves to be playing at a very high level on the heroes that he is comfortable with and that are his niche. So I feel like this is a pickup where I think Seoul have looked at this team. They've seen that Sabiolbi is, again, fan favorite, can still play the game at a very high level, one of the most popular and famous Korean players that we have in the Overwatch scene. And they were like, okay, let's pick him up. You know, there's a good spot for him on our roster, which I don't think there's anything wrong with. You know, there may come a time as well. There might be a circumstance in the season over the course of it where one player just can't play for one reason or another. And Sabiolbi is the one who's going to step up in that position.
I do think it's always good to have that additional player, right? For that exact reason. Season's long, man.
Josh is
long. Or well, not actually. No, I don't think this season is going to be as long. But
no, this season actually isn't very long at all. But it has been the case in the past. Yeah.
I think you always need that extra one.
I'm rubbing my face because the more you guys are talking, the more I feel inclined to go for the hot take. Because
what is it?
I think Sabiolbi's going to make this team worse. I really think so. And I don't think it's because Sabiolbi's bad.
They field him all the time.
I think they're going to try and field him regularly. Yeah.
You think?
I think they're going to field him regularly in different variations. They're going to throw him in, and they're going to fail when he's in, I think. Because here's the thing. Don't really have that much faith in the Seoul
coaching staff.
Yes. I think they've
been around a while, by the way.
Yes.
Changun, joined date, so the head coach has been around since, I believe, August 2018. Changun has been around since then.
Changun's been with Profit and Gesture since the dawn of... Oh, wait. Yeah, I think
Yeah, he was on
Changun
loan in
is
season 1. Yeah, he was on loan in season 1.
he was on GC
Busan,
Busan
right?
as well, though, with Hawkery.
Yeah.
Essentially, the majority of this coaching staff outside of Changun has been with this team for the 2020 season because they joined at the tail end of 2019.
And because they made the finals, I feel like, everything came up roses at the end. But that season, I feel like, let me take a tangent just for a moment, though.
Yeah.
We have no idea what coaches do if they don't speak English. I mean, if they don't speak English and the team doesn't speak English, so like reports of their coaching never filter down to us because we only speak English. Well, actually, I'm saying that I only speak English. Jonathan speaks Swedish. He's far more intelligent than me.
Speaks Korean.
Joel speaks some Korean as well, actually, yeah. So it's just me and Bren, the little peephole lad 3 heads that only speak English. But as a general statement, it's much harder to get a grip on what the APAC coaches do. Mm-hmm. Unless they're like IMT or Wizard Hyung, who spoke fluent English as well. But, I mean, they're on the APAC because NYXL's in APAC. But the overarching point is that even if you accept that we are ignorant of what these coaches do and so more likely to be biased against them, the season itself, just based on the actual evidence of what happened last season, screams that they just couldn't regulate what was happening in the server at all. They just, even if you had Krusty coach a team that had that kind of season, you'd say, wow, what the hell was going on there? So even if there could be some bias because we don't actually interact with these coaches and we're more likely to favor Western coaches, the season that they had indicated that was not a good coaching season. And I don't think there's ever been a good coaching season since, I don't know. Whenever I think about Seoul, I just think about the players. It seems to be just based on whether the players can succeed in that meta. It's not based on them adapting really well and having a great read on the meta and that kind of stuff. Maybe they'll change in the future, but I do not particularly have faith in the Seoul coaching staff to make smart decisions about how the roster is utilized, to make smart decisions about what compositions they want to run and how to really read in depth into the metas. I think that they're going to field Sabiobi more than they should this season, and I think it's going to hurt them. And what evidence do I have to base that on? Just last season.
Speculation.
No, I think it's a fair criticism. And it's been like that historically for Seoul Dynasty. I think they had a good year with KDG. And I was one of those fans who actually liked them having 2 different teams, like 2 different rosters. Remember when they had 12 players? Yeah. I was actually a fan of that, and I like KDG. But it's fair criticism. And you're right. Historically, Seoul has been a questionable, coachable team. And it has to do with Gesture and Profit. And it has to do with Changun. And they're so up and down. But I think that's part of the charm. Oh my God, I can't.
Just snorting the copium again.
Have you got a Seoul Dynasty jersey underneath, dude. Johnny? You're going to whip your jumper off and it's going to be a Seoul Dynasty jersey. It's going to have Profit's name there, SBB's
Dude, I had
name
so
here.
much hopium before this recording. It's unreal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I know, but it's fair criticism. When you say that, I don't even think that it's as hot of a take that you think it is. I think the hot take is me being, I love this team, because I think a lot of people actually in the community as well, and people who watch, they're sort of disappointed in Seoul Dynasty. It had some of the effects of Houston Outlaws ish, except the Seoul Dynasty is good in that regard. But it has a questionable energy where you're what are Seoul going to bring to this weekend's matches? Are we going to see the good Seoul, the bad Seoul? No one knows what's going on. There's this doubt and uncertainty, and I think that's fair criticism. So yeah. I mean, I think we're going to go through the same cycle we do every year, where it's Seoul, we think they're pretty good, and we rank them I don't know, above average. I think most people ranked them 9 or 10 last year, which was absurd. I ranked them over Shanghai Dragons, which was absurd.
I think most people do that because they have no idea what's going on. Also, that's just
exactly.
dumb.
But it's the same thing this year. You look at the other APAC teams, and you're I don't know where Seoul Dynasty is going to go there. I think we're going to go through the same cycle. It's they're going to have some good performances. They're going to go through a period in 2 months where they're garbage, where they're shit, and we're going to question Profit, and we're going to question the coaching staff, Gesture. Why is Gesture playing over Marvel? It's the same cycle, and then inevitably Profit's just going to pop off. Come playoffs, it's going to look good, and we're going to be oh, screw all these people who don't give Profit enough cred. It's the same thing every year. It's gonna happen
Can you
again.
scroll down? Sorry, Kurt. Could you scroll down on that thing a little bit? I want to see. Yeah, because this sometimes gives an indication of like how swinging a team is. If you look at like shocks, they're always like, a little bit of the top down, a little bit up, a little bit and stuff. And then you look at this, you're like, okay, wow, bro, like dipping into the trough there, the chum bucket all the way down to the bottom, and then
August 8th.
bringing it all the way back up to the, you know what I mean? Like this is Seoul through and through, isn't it? I mean, they just get hard owned throughout the beginning of the season, the middle of the season, and they're just like, oh, Prophet, it's time to wake up. Here we go, baby. Take your medicine. It's time to go. And he snorts a line of G Fuel, and then he's off to the races, isn't he? And then they end up just popping in playoffs.
I
It's
think
going to be the same thing this year.
I think the cycle will improve this year. Despite to immediately reverse my hot take from earlier, I think Sabiobi. But here's the thing: I think Sabiobi might be a stumbling block for them. But I think is it think or is it hope? It's one of those words, but I don't know which. I think it's think. I think that their coaches have learned from last year, though, in terms of the tank dilemma. And I'm using a very small sample size to come to this conclusion. But in the Nexus Cup, the only preseason games that we've seen since they had that up and down season in 2020, they were fielding Marvel on the main tank role a lot. And they were actually not just throwing Marvel in to play Sigma full-time and stuff. With Sigma moving out of the meta, the coaches are going to be forced to wake up and realize that Marvel is a main tank instead of an off tank. They are just going to be slapped in the face with that reality, which means that Marvel is off that role. They have 2U who they can put in there who look pretty promising, and they can rotate Marvel and Gesture. At least any rotation is better than what they were doing last year. Seriously, any rotation is better than what they did last year.
They were lost last year.
They were lost. Completely lost.
They were in the sauce, man.
Yeah,
it was unreal.
They only did well when Gesture was able to be like on... It's not just comfort heroes for that guy. It's like comfort styles, I feel, as well. Where you want him in roles where he can really be like the focus of the team. He doesn't seem like he thrives in the metas where he's more of like a disruption main tank or has to play Reinhardt or something like that. Although the Reinhardt actually did improve last year. But Marvel is no longer going to be permanently the off tank, and that opens him up to being rotated with Gesture. And I think simply the fact that that's available will mean that the coaches naturally do it. I mean, even if you have no faith in the coaching staff, just by natural selection, trying stuff out, seeing what works, you're going to come to the conclusion that sometimes you're going to field Marvel instead of Gesture with 2U, and it's going to be a positive thing for the team. I think that not living or dying by Gesture is going to solve some of the cycle of misery or cycle of uncertainty for the Seoul Dynasty next year.
That's one way to solve consistency problems, running a consistent core.
Yeah, but the consistent core of Gesture and then Marvel off tank was not consistent.
Because that's just, it's bonkers.
Yeah, I mean,
what
it is bonkers, yeah.
It's like the I don't know, they took a thought experiment too far.
Yeah, but I think this year, they can't do that anymore.
Okay.
Like, they actually can't, because Marvel can't just play full-time Sigma. And there's no way they believe that Marvel's overall off tanks are better than 2Us. I just can't believe that they would have that opinion. No. So I think the tank line should be better in 2021.
To look closer at the tank line, though, because we kind of discussed the DPS line of this team. Marvel, I think, one of his strongest points was always he was just very good, very serviceable on the main tank role when he was playing the main tank role predominantly for them. And Gesture coming in, I think sometimes, we can be a bit like... magpies looking for the shiny objects. Gesture, he's a very shiny player, very flashy player.
Yeah.
And we can be distracted a little bit by Gesture as a player. But for me, I'm more excited if they do end up sticking with Marvel a little bit more. And Gesture, I think... Here's the thing. I mean, we talk up Gesture's Winston, talk up his Ryan. I mean, I feel like I would rather have Marvel on some of those roles now. I feel like I'm trying to tiptoe around this point, but what I'm trying to say is I think Gesture might be a little bit washed.
He's not washed, I don't think.
No way. No.
I don't think he's washed. I think he just has some metas that he really understands and he pounds. And if he
He's
doesn't,
very specific. He's very niche.
yeah,
Is that what you're trying to say?
He's
So
like a good moomer.
Okay.
Do you remember when you could? Do you remember when you could get Moomer in the right meta and he would just roll a game?
Like a flanking Winston.
Yeah, the flanking Winston
sure.
meta, and he would just dominate. And if it wasn't that, Moomer was just AFK.
But that's what I mean by washed. Is because to be a modern main tank in this era of the Overwatch League,
a model major general,
you need to be adaptable. You need to be able to play a multitude of styles on that main tank position. And this is what we're finding these days of a lot of these old main tank players, is that they've learned to play a play style. They've learned to play a hero in a style. And they attribute that style to every time they lock in that hero, when sometimes it requires a completely different approach, depending on what is meta around it. And it's that flexibility is what I'm after. Whereas, yeah, okay, you can play Winston, but can you play Winston in this particular style, in this meta, in that meta? And that's what I think is missing from a lot of these old guard tank players. Washed is a strong word with negative connotations, because I know Gesture's a good player.
it doesn't have any positive connotations.
It has no good. Yeah, it has no positive connotations.
Maybe
I
that
like
you are
Gesture as a player.
clean.
I even like player a lot as a friend. You know, when whenever we do meet each other in humanity every now and then.
When you're going to his flower shop.
Yeah, when he when I'm making up flower shop narratives and whatnot. But I do think that if they stick with Marvel, that is going to be one of the major keys to success for Seoul Dynasty this year.
Bren, you make it so difficult. Because I
I feel
agree
like I've
with
just
you, but I
insulted
also
you
disagree with
indirectly
you.
as well, Johnny.
You have. You have.
By shit
But I
talking
agree
old card main tank players.
No, because I agree with you to some extent. Sorry, Joss. I just feel so passionately about this. There will be more team previews. Don't you worry. You will get your airtime.
No, that's fine. You carry on. It's fun hearing Bren smack talk people, honestly, with no basis.
Because
I've got
I agree with
basis.
you, Bren. I still remember. I started like I put a smile on when you were doing that monologue, because I remember back to when Fisher actually left the Seoul Dynasty in season 2. And I was producing at the time. And I think like the first week after Fisher left the team and he like leaked 2-2 or something. and then I actually got my first chance, I think, at producing halftimes that week. And Seoul Dynasty were playing, and they were playing Marvel at the main tank. And I don't think Marvel had seen a ton of play at main tank before then. And I just loved Marvel. So we're trying to figure out this halftime show, and I'm kind of like telling you guys what I want to show. And I'm like, hey, Marvel's really good. We should talk a lot about Marvel, because I actually really liked his main tank play. And so when he got swapped over to this Sigma, I was like, okay, that's cool, but you know, I like Marvel main tank. And then we just went through this entire rabbit hole where like Marvel's an off-tank player now. But here's the thing. I actually think they'll play Marvel a little bit at off-tank, because I actually like 2U as well. I like 2U as well, and I think he'll probably play Diva and Zarya. But if he has to play Sigma, I do think that Seoul might sub in Marvel again at Sigma, because they'll just be comfortable. They'll be like, oh, well, you know, Marvel, you go play the Sigma character, and I don't know, Gesture can play Roadhog or Orisa or, you know, whatever. And I genuinely think that the Seoul coaching staff will do that. But also when it comes to Gesture, Bren, I think you need to be reminded that in stage 1 last year, when they had that good run in the main melee, Gesture actually looked really good on the Winston for some periods of time. Like, his Winston was really on point. But I agree with you in that sometimes Gesture has this thing where it's like, he doesn't have the best ability usage. And like, if he were to go up against a Shock playing like a solid matchup, he'd just be dominated by like Choyobin and Super and Smurf and like how good they are. Because like, he can't beat them in that traditional style. Gesture beats teams by being Gesture, like going beyond that. I don't know. I sound like a madman when I say this to myself. I don't know. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think
like,
it's
he is
really
unique in that regard.
Yeah. I think it's really something that the fans don't get, is that people can be good at one style of Winston. Like, if you want to give an example, like a really simplified example, like, you could be good at the dive style of Winston, where you go mega aggressive with, like, remember that comp the Philly Fusion were playing in the playoffs, where it was, you know, like the Winston, the Diva, the Tracer, the Sombra, and you just, you're just going in. that is such a different style of Winston to a pokey double bubble style of Winston where you're having to play for your life and always play around the bubbles and try and generate your primal rage. And it's only when you have nano and primal when you can go hard engage. Like that, the thought processes are so different for the two. And there's a multitude of other styles as well where you could be playing Winston or a bunch of different characters too. And some people are good at some of them and not good at others. And the community only thinks about things in terms of
heroes.
He is good at Winston. Yeah, in terms of like just the heroes. Instead of it's not even based on the comp, it's based on the style of what the comp does a lot of the time. And I think Gesture's one of those players. When I think about Gesture, I think about a guy who is just elite at certain styles of the game. It's not just certain styles of Winston, it's certain styles of the game overall. But he just doesn't get some of the stuff. He just doesn't get it. He still tries to play like he does in the other styles. And he just ends up wasting his abilities, overreaching himself, and getting punished. And yeah, he doesn't have that conservative mindset of being able to maximize his life and like play for value over time as much as other people do. And it puts him at a disadvantage in some metas where I think Marvel is going to be a better shot for them. But I do think they're going to do that.
What do you reckon, Jules?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, it's just like a greedy playstyle, right? It's like almost a solo queue playstyle where it's like, okay, I always go ham and just hope everybody backs me up, but my like mechanical skill is just going to outplay anybody in their backline. And then that's how I generate value. Like other than, like you said, rather than like the double bubble where you're like constantly poking and hopefully like getting in there a little bit, helping your Zarya build up charge and then backing off and maximizing your lifetime, right? And you can't play that hyper aggressive Winston because it puts strain on your supports in certain metas, which require you to basically protect your supports at all costs and then wait for Nano to kind of go in. And yeah, I Bren's point, honestly. I think maybe Seoul end up turning it around this season and show they have more than kind of one flavor of main tank. I don't know. It's fairly interesting, and especially looking at the meta now where we're maybe seeing double shield come back with things like the Genji, especially in the APAC region where basically every ult has like ridiculously high value, and that's why they kind of played like the Blade and Nano Blade, for example, Flux, obviously Bongo as well, which is a crazy tool to use, which you can generate so quickly in those kind of comps because of the damage boosts. You're going to need to be able to show that kind of flexibility, because if you don't, you're just going to crash and burn like Seoul kind of have done at the start of multiple seasons, it feels.
Yeah. Let's talk about the support line, because it's the last piece that we need to discuss with the overarching team.
Yeah.
You've got we have Creative and Animo.
Why don't you want to?
I feel like it just turns down my hype for the team. It just diminishes what I like about the team.
I'm not going to say lackluster. That's not the word I'm going to use to describe, but moderate is the word I would use to describe this support line. Because they had Slime. They got rid of Slime.
They didn't play Slime.
They didn't play Slime either.
Basically ever.
But they had him as an option. And now they've got Animo as a player. And every time I've watched Animo play, I've always just thought, okay, serviceable. You know? I've never thought... amazing.
He doesn't do anything.
Because he just plays his role. He just plays his role, and when you're playing your role on main support, it's very hard to see if you
exist.
It's
you just exist on main support. It's like sick. If you got a bad support player on your team in ranked, hey bro, you want to hit that Lucio? We'll tell you when to press E, bro. It's all good. Like,
but he doesn't. Okay, here's the thing. Okay, he doesn't press E on speed though. He presses E on healing. Like Animo was consistently. Like peaked at healing per 10 among all Lucios, because I remember don't give any. I'm giving slander to Captain Planet here, and he's not going to be happy because I'm going to misquote him, and I'm sorry in advance, Ben. But he brought up stats, and there was something like Animo's just like this huge outlier in Lucios because all he does is heal. Like he just sits back and heal. Like he doesn't go in, and he doesn't do like IDK and just like goes in and just like gets frags. You were talking about Toby. He's like, oh, boops for the boop god. You know that famous line. Like Animo is nothing like that. So I'm kind of concerned that he's not going to mesh with what Seoul Dynasty is about.
All right, here's the word I would use to describe Animo and Creative as a backline is underrated, actually. Because I think almost everybody has this same opinion where they think it's a weak backline.
I never said weak, I said moderate.
Okay, moderate.
Well,
do you mean league average? Because I don't think I think most people would consider them
I say
below.
league average.
But Okay, all right, fair enough then. Maybe they're not underrated if the idea is that they're league average.
I don't speak for the people.
No, you don't speak for the people. The people speak for
sometimes
themselves.
sometimes I'm way off.
Speak against the people.
Yeah.
But I think that Anamo's a bit of a weird character to talk about for next season. He's a little bit like Mano, where they've only ever played inside the very, very strictly one-dimensional system of the NYXL, where you pocket Jonak at all costs. And you are playing a conservative, reactive style where you are waiting for your opponent to do something and you are trying to outlast it, and then you are going to do like your counter punch. And that isn't how Seoul play whatsoever. So I don't know whether or not Animo can work comes down to whether or not he can adapt his style to this team. But I also think that Toby wasn't a ridiculous character. Toby wasn't in his most recent years, when he first joined the league, or even before the league, when he played for Lunatic High, he was one of the most aggressive Lucios. He was one of the first people to really figure out how to get value out of the role by being aggressive. He ended up getting eclipsed massively by other people who were way more aggressive than him. Toby was mainly known at the end of his career, I feel, for like the value he was getting on Mercy more than anything else. You compare that to Animo. Animo's Mercy is really good. Animo's Lucio, I think, can be at the same level as Toby's can, where Toby wasn't getting huge value. Toby wasn't an enormous name like a Lee Jagon or a Moth or a Funny Astro or something like that, or an FD God who's going around, creating plays all over the place. And their team as well, they seem to, generally speaking, be structured around having very supportive supports for the DPS and the tank line anyway. It's your job as a Seoul support is most of the time to make sure that the DPS and the tanks are doing their job rather than having the freedom to go and make your own plays. I think this should be a very serviceable backline for how Seoul wants them to play. I don't think you need more out of your team when you have the potential for an elite level tank line and DPS line. I say potential because sometimes this tank line will not be elite, but in their best moments, the tank line and the DPS line for this team is going to be world class. And I think Toby and Creative were very supportive in the ways that they played. And I think Creative had some great moments towards the end of the season when he started getting played more. Do I wish they'd made more use of Slime? Yeah, absolutely, because Slime's phenomenal. But I think Animal works.
There's definitely a way that you can play support like super. It's like Jonak, right? Where it's like always going for the headshots, like taking aggressive angles kind of thing, because he knows he can kind of carry. There's definitely two ways you can play support in, like super defensive and supportive of the rest of your team, or you can just go out there like Astro and just start bunny hopping on Farah's heads as they're ulting, trying to kill them. And like obviously we're not going to see that with this lineup, but I agree in the sense that it's probably good for the Dynasty backline to play super supportive and make sure the other teams are doing their job, just the facilitators of the Dynasty in the back, just making sure you keep yourselves alive and not going for anything too wacky.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
I 100% agree.
I feel like, and I don't mean this in like gameplay wise, like skill, but I think they're going to miss a little bit of what Toby brought to this team. Just like presence, shot calling, play style. I think I understand what you're saying with like facilitating the rest of the team. I'm just concerned that it breeds this kind of like slower play style. I think when you have the likes of Profit, Fitz, Gesture, you want at some point like press the gas pedal and be like, hey, how far can we push it? And be a bit more they're never
going to play like the
try
shot.
some different stuff. I don't want them to sit back too much, and I guess I'm scared that this backline will be too conservative in that regard, because even with Toby, like you'd get some wacky stuff here now. And, to his criticism, but also I think it brought a lot of exploration in playstyle and compositions, and like it pressured your limits. So,
for sure,
I think they're serviceable. They will do well, but I am going to miss a little bit of Toby or Bedosin to just kind of like just be wonky, mess around, and do sometimes throw games. But I think that's for the betterment of the team sometimes in the long run.
I'd also like to hop on that point as well with Badosin and talking about the shot calling. Badosin's previously, I don't know whether he still was towards the whole of last year, but within the London Spitfire team, he was the primary shot caller for them, and then Gesture was secondary. And one of our big worries, I remember when we were doing these exact same episodes for last year, one of our big worries for Seoul was that they had taken that core that is so unreliable in terms of being like their shot calling and their like strategic play, and they just ported it pretty much wholesale, the entire calling structure, into the Seoul Dynasty. And I think they're weaning themselves off that. Like, I think the introduction of creative more and more towards the end of the year was them weaning themselves off Badosin's shot calling and that kind of thing. If I had to, make an educated guess, because we don't know for sure who was still doing calling towards the end of that. But I think that's another positive move for their consistency next year, is that they're playing with an extremely consistent backline, and the shot calling necessarily has to transition away from Badosin and Gesture, because Gesture's not going to get fielded every day, and Badosin's not on the team anymore. So I think that is another positive move for them, where, all right, you might say you missed the skill a little bit of Badosin, but creative's great, and I think this is a better move for them in terms of like the team dynamic, the calling structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So where are we feeling on our weird transient scale?
Your ranking system is so ass, Bren. I'm sorry, but
but that's the point. It's supposed to be ass. It's supposed to be indecipherable.
Is this our first time doing an APAC team?
No, we did Guangzhou.
Oh, we did Guangzhou. Oh, right. I find it hard to use your rating scale for the APAC teams because
the viewers don't understand it.
Could you give me a TLDR of what it is?
Basically, you haven't watched any of our episodes?
I don't watch the team previews.
Okay.
Right. Okay, then.
Maybe. Wow.
Well,
what can I say? I mean,
if Jaws gets any of the details wrong when he comes in casting next year, and he's like, he comes in and
any
he's
of the details. Sorry, is this gospel? Are you writing the script for the Overwatch League and how it's going to happen now? Is that what you're saying, Josh? Hang on a second. Leaks. Overwatch TMZ. I've caught him red-handed.
These are the narratives that basically the ranking system goes. I think we do. Like, basically you can make it up however you want. You can do like 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do like, no, don't do 1, 2, 3, 4.
No,
actually.
we've been using A, B, C, and D.
We're doing like S tier, A tier.
No one's used S tier. No one's used S tier.
No one's used S tier yet, but we haven't got to an S tier team. But basically,
very
it's
good.
like a lettered ranking. You can go plus, you can go minus. It's like
fighting games.
It's supposed to be ambiguous. Yeah.
Sure.
You know how everyone who watched and Reddit loved how we ranked teams last year. We just kind of took that away and just like decided to rank teams, but in an ambiguous way, so no one understands it.
What an idea!
We're teasing. We're gonna get to that. We're gonna do the proper rankings, and it'll be a big huzzah. And then nobody's gonna care because we've strung them along so long.
Exactly. We're doing
that
the
ranking video has to be like 2 hours long. Like if it's not 2 hours long, I'll be disappointed.
Yeah. It is actually. I mean, it's going to be at least 2 hours long because we have so much to sort out. I feel like the APAC region is so up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with ranking the APAC teams is that the competitiveness of the region should be so close that the difference between being top 2 in APAC and bottom 2 in APAC might genuinely, well, maybe not bottom 2, but bottom 3 might just be a couple of games.
Yeah, especially with less games in the season.
Yeah. And if they all take games off each other and there's no free wins, the APAC teams should be rated lower than the American teams, even if they're better.
When they're placed into the overall
standings? When they're placed in the overall standings, if you're in a really competitive region, you're not going to get as many free wins as you would if you're playing against, the teams that you would.
I mean, they do have Valiant in America.
They do have Valiant, which should be. But there isn't another team in APAC that's free wins for any team, I don't think. There's like a lot of competition there.
There is the risk.
So I find it really hard to rate them.
There's a risk that some APAC teams that have made drastic changes might utterly fail in their experimentation.
True.
Which is always a problem. But yeah,
almost not enough teams to rate, really.
I'll fucking start. I mean, we're tiptoeing around this.
Yeah.
I'll bust out a B- for the Seoul Dynasty, I think, coming into APAC. I think that firmly sets them in my mind that I'm expecting them to at least be above the middle of the pack because I'm hoping that they're going to be solving the biggest issue I had with them, which is their consistency with a lot of these seemingly theoretical changes. I mean, they've still got it could still go wrong, but I think I'm hoping that they would have learned from their mistakes coming into this year, and I think they've got a bunch of punching power when it comes to like their DPS line and their tank line as well, in terms of the players that you want to be playmaking for them. And I mean, I'll stand by my earlier point that I think the support line is kind of just moderate. I agree with your point, like creative. He was really heating up towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
Animo has always just, performed his role very well within New York Excelsior. It's hard to criticize him. It's hard to really see overwhelming impact that he's having because he doesn't really play a high progressive play style. But this team put together could be performing above the middle of the pack. But I put the minus there just in case as a caveat, because you never know with Seoul. You never know with this team. They can be fluctuating all over the place. So that's where the minus comes from for me.
I think I'm pretty high on Seoul next season, maybe compared to the average as well. I feel much better about their tank line and how they're going to change that around. I feel good about the back line and the changes that's going to make for their consistency. And even though I can see them running into problems if they try and field save Yobi often, I think most of the time it's just easy. You just field fits and profit. So I'm going to give them a B+ here. I was thinking about putting them into the A tier with like an A-, but I think it makes more sense for me to say B+, because I think that they probably will have some issues like grabbing all of the possible wins in APAC just because it's a really competitive scene. But the plus is like, I think they're going to be somewhere around like 5 to 10. And then they have the chance of, in tournaments, doing a lot better. Like if they can win tournaments and get more league points, which is how the league standings are built this year, they should be in a prime position to actually overtake other APAC teams. They could go even the entire year long, but if they peak in the tournaments and they actually make a finals, maybe win a tournament as well, they're going to get more free wins, free league points, and they're going to overtake their rivals in APAC. So I'm going to put them in the B+ because I feel like they're a good team and they could achieve greatness.
Mm-hmm.
Jaws.
A couple of throwaway rankings, huh? The classic B, which is, well, I mean, that sounds like a bit of a 7, where you go with 7 because you're not sure either way. I mean, I'd probably go with an A, maybe an A+, maybe. We'll see, because there's an S, isn't there? An S-, S, and
S is
an S+.
Creme de la creme.
Yeah, that's creme de la creme. I'm putting them under creme de la creme, bro. I think with this, I want to make a bit of an out there prediction, maybe a bit of a hot take. I'm going to go with a solid A for Seoul, just on their DPS plus playoffs profit every single time in the tournament. Maybe, probably not. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, just going on the fact that I think this meta is going to be, or like at least the start of the season's meta, because it will change, of course. Just because it is so varied, I think, they're going to be able to do well because you can almost play your own style, which is what a lot of players from the teams from the Steel Series Invitational Tournament said. I was speaking to a lot of them and they were saying, it's actually, you can almost just play your own style right now and get away with it because there's lots of different things people are running and can run. So if you just kind of play your own game, it can work out a little bit better for you some of the time if like the standard hardcore meta comps, which don't super exist, obviously map dependent right now. So I'm gonna give it an A, just because Seoul can potentially just continue to play their own game in their own style of Overwatch.
All right, what are you giving me?
Were you guys
Seoul
considering
fan,
the S? Josh and Bren, were you guys considering S existed? Is that part of the rankings? I didn't consider S in any previous.
I thought you said S.
I haven't been thinking about it, but also
it doesn't really
I thought
matter
A+
because
was
this
the
is
max.
This is just giving the people like a general grade of like our first impressions, and then when we actually do the power rankings, then you'll have a concrete placement of where we put these teams. Yeah, the entire we're thinking too much about this ranking system. It's supposed to be ambiguous. It's supposed to be shit. It's supposed to get people excited for the future. It's having the opposite effect at the moment, but only because we keep talking about it.
There, bro. Go A or something.
Yeah, but he said I didn't know that S was part of the ranking. So when he said A+, I thought he was saying like, "Oh, this is the best Overwatch of all time." I was like, A+ as far as it goes. He's like, "This is better than Shanghai and Shock," and I'm like,
no, absolutely.
No. Okay, well, if S is part of it, then I was going to say B, but if S is part of it, then I probably have to go like B plus then.
But
here's the thing. I actually think I actually think that
think less about a ranking and more of a way to just summarize your feelings about the team.
Yeah, well, I'm about to summarize my feelings.
Didn't you just spend half an hour just kissing the cheek of the Seoul Dynasty logo?
Yeah, but like, it's still, if you look at this, I think there's a few bumps in the road that I don't think you can overlook. Okay, so I think inevitably, I don't think they're going to be as consistent as Sideshow thinks, or they're going to be so consistent that they're going to lose some of these matches they wouldn't have won last year. That's one way to look at it.
That's a fair point.
I think there's going to be a few bumps in this season when they'll be wishing that they had a second flex player. And I know they didn't get too much out of Illicit, the last couple of seasons, but there's going to be some point in the season where it's like, we'll see Sabiol be on Torbjorn and be like, okay, buddy, what's happening here? Like, okay, Prophet is like playing Echo or something, and then Fitz is like going to play Symmetra, and we're like, oh, put the seatbelt on, kids, that kind of thing. So I think there will be a few bumps in the road. I still think this is a good team. But I'm gonna say B plus. I don't love the roster. This might be my least favorite Seoul roster the past 3 seasons or 4 seasons.
Really?
But I mean that's living up to it. Like season 1, it's the Lunatic High core. Season 2, got like tons of fun new players. You had Fisher in there as well with like some of the core from Lunatic High. You had last year where you had like Slime, Bedoshin. You had like, I actually kind of liked Illicit when you saw him on Genji like once every season, and then you never saw him again. Prophet, of course. Mitchell was in there like playing some Summer Diva. Like they were great, fantastic rosters. I'm not saying that this one will be worse performance-wise, but like I'm not a fan. Like, what's a synonym for fan? I'm not a fan, but as someone who enjoys this team, I'm not sure if I'll enjoy this particular roster as much as I like the previous versions of it.
That's wild. I think this is their best roster. I think that they should be the most consistent they've ever been.
I don't think he's saying best, though. I think
I'm not talking about gameplay. I'm talking about like as likability or entertainment.
Okay.
I'm going to say B+, but I think there's going to be a few bumps in the road. And I just hope that the Profit and Gesture injects me with some of the nostalgia boomer shit.
All right.
What placement do you need to be to make it to the stage playoffs in APAC? I think
top 4.
Top 4. I think they should
Top 4, play for 2 spots. I think it is.
I think they should be aiming to get in and to the finals most tournaments.
Yeah.
Is that? I mean, I'm not saying that they should make the finals every tournament, but that should be their goal. Is minimum we make it, and maximum. Well, I suppose maximum we win it, but like it would be great for them to be able to make multiple finals. I think this team is capable of that.
Okay, well,
agreed.
Thanks for watching the Seoul Dynasty team preview. It's we had some shaky moments during this episode. A lot of disagreements. Almost came blow to blow. At times.
Did we?
If Jaws was here in person, I would.
Yeah.
blow with him.
That's why I stay in LA, mate.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We'll have another team preview out soon. Saturday, in fact, because they come out on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Come out on a very regular, twice a week, actually. So you can look forward to that one. Set your calendars. Okay, Google, set a calendar notice for team preview on Saturday. 9 a.m. Wake me up. Hopefully I set off all your phones. Anyway, thanks for watching. Good night.